Well, good morning. I'll wait for some of you to come on. Um, so good morning. I came on a little late. My apologies. I'll wait for some more of you to come on. I want to confess to you that we've been a little disappointed after COVID. Our numbers have dropped on this call. So here's what we're thinking about doing. We'll continue our 8 o'clock Sunday morning manna, which is inconvenient for some people on the West Coast. And we'll begin to do some things kind of spontaneously, deliberately. But we're not sure where we're going to go with the dailies after the first of the year. We're still thinking about it, praying about it. It's not a lot of time, and yet it always intrudes on the schedule. I grab a suitcase and head to the airport in a few minutes for my last trip of the year, and then I have one more prayer call after this. So anyway, Alan Green, God bless you. Bob, good morning. God bless you. Still reeling over a funeral last night, Alan. I don't know if you were there or not. It was a large crowd. Heartbreaking, honestly. A young pastor in the state here, leader of a discipleship program, very popular, died suddenly last week. I think we're all dancing with how fragile life is. Michael, God bless you, Pastor. Yeah, they're okay. Yeah, Barbara and I got caught in the traffic, 3 wrecks, and we did not get there until the event started. So I have in front of me a book. It's an older book. I just am new to the book. It's called Uncompromised Faith by Overcoming Our Culturalized Christianity by Michael Craven. Very well written book. The foreword is by Josh McDowell. And I've been reading the book over, I rarely read a book. I'm usually reading about 5 at a time. And it helps me cross-pollinate. I've been reading a book on the history of the church in the first 5 centuries. And I've been reading this book. And I've been reading another book on the emergent culture and decoding postmodernism, particularly the gender diversity issue. And then I've been reading Desmond Tutu's book on forgiveness. And then I've been reading on Elijah and Elisha. And I've been gone through about 5 or 6 books on Elijah and Elisha, just kind of storing my heart up. But this book troubled me. And good morning, Bonnie. Good morning, Monica. Here is a Chinese Academy of Social Sciences speaking to a group of Westerners. And one of the things that they were looking at was what accounted for success in Western culture. We studied, they said, everything: the historical, the political, the economic, the cultural. At first, they said, we thought you had more powerful guns than we had. And then we thought you had the best political system. And then we thought it was free enterprise, your economic system. But in the past 2 decades, as we've continued to study, we've realized this is Chinese. These are Chinese social scientist. In the past 2 decades, we've studied the heart of your culture is your religion, Christianity. This is why you have been so powerful. It's the Christian moral foundation of social cultural life that has made possible the emergence of all of the other elements, capitalism, free market, and then the successful transition to democratic politics. We, the Chinese social scientists say, don't have any doubt about this. I caught a glimpse yesterday of a Chinese leader who was analyzing the American culture, and he made this observation. He said, you now have, and he's referring to groupthink. He's referring to totalitarianism as a mindset. He said, you now have the same thinking. You're moving in the same direction that the Chinese moved in the 1950s and the 1960s that gave solidarity to our cause. And he's saying this in a very calm, placid manner. As an outsider, you've been captured in a kind of web of groupthink, and you're all moving in the same direction. The totalitarianism that's being imposed upon us, and it is being imposed upon us, is not by the government as it was in the case of the Chinese. It is by our own higher institutions, by education, by the press, by the media, by the medical community. And it is a manifestation of a kind of groupthink that creates group lockstep. It is a peer pressure that moves us together. It is wrong for us to assume that if this doesn't come from the government, it doesn't get us to the same devastating end. Because you see, what drives this, Paul said in Ephesians 2, is a spirit, an ill wind from the middle heaven. And whether it catches the flags of government, communism, or socialism, or it catches the flags of popular culture and educational and enlightenment elitism, it still gets us to the same destructive end. I quote Yale Law School professor Arthur Leff. He is an atheist. I quote him, "If God does not exist, there is no metaphoric equivalent for God. No person, no combination of people, no document, however hallowed by name, no process, no premise, nothing as equivalent to an actual God in the central function as an unexaminable examiner of good and evil and what is good and evil. The so-called death of God seems to have affected the total elimination of any coherent, convincing, ethical, legal system. We're being pushed along by this invisible wind from the middle heaven, moving us toward this groupthink, group act, peer pressure, cultural peer pressure that traps you and you can't get out of it and you dare not speak against it. And the background for that is the removal of anchors, of moral anchors, principally the very notion of God himself, or God itself, if you might say it in a very, very impersonal way. What is the consequence of that? Well, I'm quoting from Michael's book, Barna Group. 86% of American teens, new generation, said they were Christian at the turn of the millennium. at 2000. 3 out of 5 said that they were a committed Christian. 1/3, 34% said, I have been born again. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. 7 out of 10 of these kids are engaged in a church-related activity. Same group. 2 out of 3 do not believe that Satan is a personal being. They see evil as symbolic. They don't feel the influence in their own life, pulling them into the vortex of this kind of group think. 3 out of 5, 61%, believe if you're generally good, you go to heaven. Half believe that Jesus Christ was a sinner just like you and me. 30%, all religions lead to the same God. It's a different path, but they end up in the same way. Moral truth depends on the circumstances. 83%. No absolute truth, no absolute right and wrong. Everything is relative. Only 6% believe in absolute moral truth. What are our kids learning in youth group? For that matter, what are we teaching at home? We have no principle. We have celebration services, inspiration, put your hands together for Jesus, but we are afraid to preach the truth, teach the truth. Nobody wants castor oil, and so we avoid it. High levels of inspiration and entertainment, low levels of truth. Now, I would submit to you that, and I've been saying this across the board, I feel sometimes like nobody's listening. You don't try to change the whole church. You don't sprinkle a little prayer in the whole church and make it better. You come, as Jude said, over to the side and find a remnant, 5%, 10%, 15, 20% of your Sunday morning crowd, and you begin to redirect them into Bible-based, value-based prayer that focuses upon personal discipleship, the embrace of discipline, and mission. And you grow that church. That's the church that you grow. It's not the 5,000 that needs to be fed or the 4,000 that needs to fish in the loaves. That crowd is not going to be around at the crucifixion. That's not going to be the crowd that makes the difference and changes the world. The crowd that's going to change the world is the 12, the 70, the 120. Most pastors are investing in trying to build the 4,000, the 5,000. You build by building the 3, the 12, the 70, and the 120. There is a group that wants truth. There is a group that will take straight, plain, unadorned teaching. There is a group that will embrace by the Spirit and by grace the importance of personal discipline in their own life. Josh McDowell asked one group, and out of his study, his book, The Last Generation, he asked 100 or 1,000, can a person who doesn't share your religious beliefs, who isn't a Christian, attain salvation? 70% of evangelical Christians said yes. This is the total loss of the truth. And if you lose the truth, you lose the truth, you lose the one who is truth, you lose God himself, and you end up in a morass of vague moral platitudes and write and script your own religion. We have people who say, I believe the Bible, but they don't know what it says, and they don't accept it as the guide for their own life. There's perhaps been no other area where we have been under cultural assault like the area of sexual libertinism, etc. And the wrenching free, and it starts with Maslow. And Maslow, you have to understand, it's not just a sociological perspective; it's a theology. And Maslow's theology is now American theology. It's the idea that, to simplify it, that you have to meet basic felt physical needs: safety, housing, and Maslow puts in sexual satisfaction. Has nothing to do with marriage. This is why we pass out condoms. You must be sexually liberated, sexually fulfilled, basic needs: food, shelter, housing. And then Maslow said, you go to intangible needs, psychosocial, and then finally you self-actualize. Of course, Maslow, I don't think, ever met many people who were self-actualized. The Bible does it exactly the opposite. It begins with the inner. It begins with the thing that you can't rationally understand. You can't always describe it in terms of feeling. It is an encounter with God that changes your life. It is what Frankl called the nexus of meaning and purpose in your life. Now, Frankl was an existentialist, sadly, but he said the way that he survived the German Nazi concentration camp was to assign meaning to his life. Now, that's like nailing a peg in midair and holding on. The truth is, there is an absolute. There is meaning. There is purpose. There is something transcendent, because there is someone who is transcendent. And when you grasp that, and when that grasps you, then everything begins to clear up for you in life. Not necessarily from the left side of your head. It isn't a cerebral kind of thing. You can't understand it all. This is a faith venture. And then God begins to meet physical, felt, measurable needs in your life. But what we've done is we've taken all of these felt needs, made them a right, pushed them over here, and made them the great priority of our life. That I have housing, that I have food, that I have transportation, that I have the means to express myself sexually, apart from any kind of moral responsibility, apart from any obligation to the culture. The culture owes this to me, and the culture must pay this to me. This is where we are. And this is what Maslow's hierarchy of social needs and Maslow's theology has produced for us. It has produced a culture that's detached from absolute morality, absolute truth, that only wants to be satisfied, that demands to be satisfied. The government owes me this. You owe me this because you're at a better place than I am in life. Once you separate all of these things from home and from family and from marriage, you have a very different culture. It is ordered in a completely different way. And here's what you find sociologists will tell you, and this is a biblical idea, is that all of these alternative family structures that are emerging are devoid of the social expectations you find in Scripture, that you find in traditional marriage, like commitment, like fidelity, like selflessness, and Michael Craven makes this point. Whenever Greek, Roman, Babylonian, Sumerian empires, though they began with strong marriage-centered monogamous practices, when they degenerated to sexual libertinism, as we have done in the last 70 years, that preceded their demise. Because the cost of divorce on a culture, emotionally and every other way, the cost of paternal absence, and now 43% of fathers are absent at the birth of their children. The cost of these out of wedlock births, the cost of the drug addiction, and what we use to sedate ourselves to keep ourselves going, the cost, the emotional toll of suicide that we now give tacit approval to. All of these things are staggering. You know the name Margaret Sanger. I know you do. She founded the American Birth Control League in 1921, 100 years ago. That became Planned Parenthood. What was her purpose? Sexual liberty, libertinism. And the idea that she wanted to create a sexual freedom that would produce a utopia. And yet you're back to Maslow, aren't you? You're back to this whole idea that happiness is found in the physical, whether it's something you possess or some experience that you have. And she believed that this would bring spiritual illumination. And of course, you know what happened was natural selection, and not only the destruction of unwanted children and children that were defective in some way, but then the introduction of abortion. And we're praying that God somehow will give us grace as a nation to turn that back, and fearful at the same time that if Supreme Court rules in the way that you and I might desire, we might see an explosive summer next summer, as we did two summers ago. You should know this. You should know this. Sanger was indicted on obscenity charges. She probably wouldn't be indicted today, but she was then. She fled to Europe. She left her husband and 3 children and began a series of adulterous affairs. And one of them was with the famed English sex researcher called Henry Havelock Harris. Kinsey came along a couple generations later, or a couple decades later, and he did his study, which was completely skewed. Looking back now, everybody understands he made up his data. He cherry-picked his data. And of course, what he was promoting was the idea that any kind of sexual restraint, any kind of moral parameters, any kind of consequences were an illusion. And he wanted to get the government out of the regulation of any kind of moral sexual behavior. And of course, Kinsey won. And Hugh Hefner popularized, along with other people, Larry Friend and others, popularized that. Here's the truth, and this data is suppressed. Good marriages between a man and a woman that's well-meaning are falling apart. The 7-year itch is now the 2-year itch. And the divorce rate is far too high. And the divorce rate for second marriages, I've seen stats around 62%. Third marriages is higher. Fourth marriages is higher. We don't get better at this. We get worse at this. And yet, by the way, only 5% of couples make it to 50 years in marriage. But if you look at non-heterosexual marriage, the average is less than 5 years, and the great majority are not monogamous marriages, even if it's the same-sex partners. There's extraordinary and prolific sexual libertinism, and this becomes then a front to make a kind of moral recklessness respectable. I'm grieved. I'm stirred. I'm moved. I'm praying. How do you wake up a culture? How do you do it with a narrative in the church that's purely inspirational, that doesn't, I don't blame a pastor. You don't want to go front and center and preach on this Sunday, but somebody needs to talk about this. And somebody needs to prepare us to talk about this and give us language and concepts to combat what is now a tsunami. It's not outside the church. It's inside the church with millennials and with Gen Z. And we have to somehow find a way to embrace a Christianity that simply isn't love. It's also truth. There is no gospel love without truth. Without truth, all you have is love that's a wrapping for a lie. And if you have truth without love, you have no truth at all, because the great truth is that God loves us. You need a gospel that's love and truth and power. What's the power for? You can't live this truth, and you can't love this kind of love. uh, and yet God is calling us to live this truth and love this unconditional love. Somebody asked me recently, don't you find Christianity intolerant? I said, no, you don't understand. At its core, Christianity is uncompromised absolute truth that's hard. But at its edge, it's unconditional love. And that is a contradiction. And we tend to drift to the edge and make Christianity unconditional love, or go to the heart and make it hardcore, uncompromisable, absolute truth. No. You have to have both. And you can't hold both in tension without the power of the Holy Spirit, without the grace of God working in your life and in my life. So I'm praying for a spiritual wake-up call in America. But I think it begins with you and I breaking our silence. And we have to do that. A note here that says, pray for Canada. We're in a worse mess. Absolutely. In Canada, in fact, it's become illegal to say some of the things that I'm saying to you. Do you think that's not coming? Started in Europe, came to Canada, it's coming here now. And we have to make up our mind. Do we just want a social club to go to on Sunday to kind of sing the songs we like and hear something that's comforting to us? Are we really, after changing the culture, at least changing the culture of the church, at least reaching our own grandchildren with the gospel? And so I'm passionate. I know I'm overly passionate this morning. I've been reflecting out of a number of books, but one of them is Uncompromised Faith, Overcoming Our Culturalized Christianity by Michael Craven. The copyright's about 8 or 9 years ago. Cultural ideas that hinder belief and adversely influence Christian life and witness. And he goes to a number of items at the back. But I found the first few chapters, The Crisis Confronting the American Church and Postmodernism, very, 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 very helpful. You can pick up a good used copy or new copy on Amazon. Father, I pray for myself. I pray for everybody on this call that you would teach us that incredibly delicate and difficult balance between unconditional love and absolute truth. And give us the grace to articulate it in ways that are compelling. Speak to us. Give us language, the language of love and truth, to reach a culture and see a spiritual awakening. In Jesus' name. Hey, I'm off to Ohio. So if there's a broadcast tomorrow and Thursday, it will be from a previous time. You may not have seen it anyway, but also pray, because we're spending tomorrow talking about the America Pray Project, prayer at the heart of every state in America in September. Some may do it a little bit early, some may do it a little bit later, of every state, all 50 states in September of next year. We're trying to wake up the nation. And then in the spring of 2023, it will be at every county. And so we're looking at 3,000 rallies across the nation, 2,500, 3,000 rallies across the nation, prayer rallies, calling the nation back to God. Incredible opportunity here. We need about $500,000 to do this. We need about 100,000 to support that project. And of course, we're also working on the Pentecostal Prayer Project which not just for Pentecostals, it will begin May. Actually, it's a Presbyterian group that's coming from South Korea. They'll go all across the nation. It'll begin May 1st and reach a climax on Pentecost Sunday, June 5th. So it'll be 34, 35 days of prayer for the nation. We'll talk more about that. You'll be able to tune in and catch those broadcasts. And then the goal is a global prayer meeting in which people from all over the world pray, every nation praying for America. Pentecost weekend next year. So God bless you. God bless you all. Cliff, good to see you on. I've not seen you on before. God bless you. Bob, Shirley, Veronica, Bonnie, I think I got the rest of you. Some of you came on, you didn't say hello. That's it. I had somebody tell me others that watch you all the time, but I never comment. Well, that's good. And I know that others watch later. God bless you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day.